Pastor, Are You on Board? By Karnik Doukmetzian. Karnik Doukmetzian, J.D., is General Counsel for the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, Silver Spring, Maryland, United States. Many of us, as pastors or administrators, belong to a variety of institutional boards. Therefore, it is vital we understand the important roles and functions we serve on them, including our fiduciary responsibilities. Some of us have not been adequately informed about whose interests we represent as we sit on these boards. This article will attempt to outline some of those key responsibilities so that our service will be both constructive and ethical. Early denominational leaders conceived the Seventh-day Adventist Church's organizational structure to follow a unique governance arrangement and constituent element that allowed for the greatest degree of membership participation. Involving church members in the church's governance process was something that those church leaders coming from Methodist backgrounds particularly subscribed to. The model settled on by those early pioneers was a representative form of church governance. Representative governance. The Seventh-day Adventist Church Manual states, quote, "The Seventh-day Adventist form of governance is representative, which recognizes that authority rests in the membership and is expressed through duly elected representatives at each level of organization, with executive responsibility delegated to representative bodies and officers for the governing of the church at each separate level." The Church Manual applies this principle of representation to the operations of the local congregation. Issues of representation in organizations with mission status are defined by operating policies, and in organizations with conference status by their constitution and bylaws. End quote. Whether we speak of the local church or school board, conference or union executive committee, or even the General Conference Executive Committee, the same responsibilities and obligations apply to all persons, whether elected or appointed. Unfortunately, some individuals elected to serve as board members at any level of church administrative organization may look at such service as an imposition, something they have to do because they hold a particular position or church office, or as an extension of their fiefdom. Others consider it their contribution of time, experience, and expertise to their church. However, with any such service, all board members undertake legal, ethical, and fiduciary responsibilities when they accept such appointments. The role of the board. The fundamental role of any board is to represent and act as the link between the constituency or membership that appointed them and the organization. It is their primary function to incorporate the interest of the congregation, constituency, or membership in their decision-making. When we speak of the local church, it has certain levels of authority and responsibility on behalf of the conference to function in its designated area. The local pastor assigned to that congregation as the official agent or employee of the conference represents both the interest of the conference to that congregation and the interest of the local church to the conference. The Church Manual outlines the role of the local church and the function of a church board. It states that, quote, "The local church operates within defined roles in Seventh-day Adventist church structure. Within the context of those roles, the business meeting is the constituency meeting of the local church." End quote. Board members must always bear in mind that they represent the interest of the constituency or membership rather than just their own interests. Good and effective governance at every level starts with the actions of the board. The board's role is to ensure that the church, school, or conference operates in such a way as to fulfill its assigned mission. Boards should not involve themselves in the day-to-day management of organizations. Their role is to monitor, guide, and enable good management, establish strategy and direction, and represent the interest of the constituency. Effective boards accomplish this by ensuring that the organization stays focused on its mission and provides adequate allocation of financial resources, while at the same time maintaining the organization's unique Seventh-day Adventist identity and mission. Some board members may attempt to operate or direct as if it were their own business or enterprise, forgetting that they were elected by the constituency or membership to represent its interests. Board members are merely representatives on behalf of the, quote, owners, end quote, the local churches, and through it, the local conference. The church manual provides guidance to local church boards on the role they are to play. They, as the church's primary committee, are to have as their, quote, chief concern an active discipleship plan in place, which includes both the spiritual nurture of the church and the work of planning and fostering evangelism, end quote. Recognizing the relationship between the local congregation and the conference, the church manual states that, quote, the conference-appointed pastor, end quote, is to serve as, quote, the chairperson of the board, end quote. All board members have numerous legal and fiduciary duties and obligations imposed on them in order to effectively carry out their responsibilities. The three most critical standards or duties are the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. Whether serving on a local church board or conference committee, all board members act in a fiduciary role. A fiduciary is defined as someone who acts for and on behalf of another in a relationship of trust. In this case, the board members are both fiduciaries of the constituencies that appointed them and also of the conference. As such, it requires that any action or decision that board members take is for the sole benefit and interest of those who place that trust in them. Duties of board members. The first major duty for board members, that of care, deals with the way a board makes decisions and oversees the governance of the organization. It expects a certain level of skill, carefulness, and prudence in the decision-making process. The legal requirement is that each board member act in good faith and in a manner he or she reasonably believes to be in the best interest of the organization. The legal standard asks what a reasonable person would do in the same or similar circumstances. In most instances, courts will not hold a board member liable for errors or mistakes in judgment, as long as their actions meet the legal standards and requirements. Board members must show that they were unbiased and impartial, made prudent decisions, acted in good faith, attended meetings when called, and have been reasonably diligent in informing themselves of the facts and issues involved. At a minimum, it requires board members to attend and actively participate in board meetings, stay informed, and be financially accountable. Board meetings are not social gatherings, but business sessions involving obligations and responsibilities for which its members are fully accountable. It is this duty that makes some reluctant to serve on boards. If board members cannot effectively carry out their fiduciary responsibilities, they should decline the appointment. The second major duty for board members is that of loyalty. It calls for them to exercise their powers in the best interest of the organization and to be faithful to its mission. An individual should not be motivated by personal, business, or private concerns, but by what is in the best interest of the organization. Positions on the board should not be used for personal or familial benefit or advantage. Breaches of this duty usually arise in the form of unreported or undocumented conflicts of interest when a board member, quote, has such a substantial personal interest in a transaction that it reasonably might affect their judgment." End quote. One must not profit from a board position at the expense of the organization. That may include engaging in activities that compromise or undermine the needs of the organization, employing organizational assets to develop personal business opportunities, or using one's position to personally benefit by selling, endorsing, or promoting a product, contact, or transaction. For example, a church is in the process of remodeling or building an addition to the structure. A church board member who is a general contractor offers a proposal to the pastor after having found out about the project. No other proposals or bids are obtained. When the proposal is presented, the board then proceeds to discuss it in the member's presence, and he does not excuse himself or declare that he has a conflict. In fact, he promotes himself as the best option and the cheapest alternative. No provision is made to ensure that the price quoted is fair, nor is the project submitted for competitive tender. The board member or his company will personally benefit from the granting of the contract. Also, because the discussion on whether to grant the contract occurred in his presence, the rest of the board place themselves in a compromised position. When conflicts of interest arise, steps must be taken to protect the board ethically and legally. Board members who have a conflict of interest or a potential conflict should disclose it in writing, remove themselves from the meeting during the discussion, and refrain from voting on the matter. Board members should also be aware of the North American Division working policy requirements on conflict of interest and abide by them. They must always be mindful that even though they are not prohibited from engaging in economic or commercial activity with the church, such transactions will be considered to be self-dealing unless they follow the proper conflict of interest protocols. Another essential characteristic of the duty of loyalty is the responsibility of maintaining the confidentiality of communications occurring at board meetings. At times, boards will have to deal with disciplinary issues of members or employees, personnel issues, or other legally protected conversations. The board member has a legal obligation to maintain the confidentiality of such discussions and not disclose such matters outside of the board meeting. While our human tendency is to share that, quote, juicy gossip, end quote, revealing such information exposes the board member and the church to potential legal liability. The third major duty that falls on board members is the duty of obedience. In carrying out its governance functions, the board collectively must ensure that it remains faithful to the church's, schools, or conference's stated mission. That means that boards should function in accordance with their constitution and bylaws, the policies of the conference, union, division, and general conference, and local, state, provincial, or federal laws and regulations. Any action taken by the board must fulfill its commitments to the constituency, community, and government, and, most importantly, its commitment to function as a Seventh-day Adventist organization. Constituencies and church members count on effective and functioning boards to oversee the operations of each organization. The success of the mission depends on the ability of the board to function in an orderly and efficient manner in performing their governance functions. Board members must always remember that the legal and fiduciary responsibilities imposed on them require that, at a minimum, they make prudent decisions and be fully informed, involved, and compliant with denominational and governmental laws and regulations. Failure of an organization in its stated mission results from the way it is managed, and at the very top of that management function is its board. Countless examples show that the ineffective functioning of some boards is the consequence of weaknesses and mistakes that begin from inadequate attention to board responsibilities and processes. When we serve on boards, we must always be mindful of our ethical and fiduciary responsibilities and, most importantly, that the pursuit of excellence in such matters is proper and worthwhile. God's work deserves such from each of us. For bibliographical and biblical references on this article, and for much more content for pastors and church leaders, please visit ministrymagazine.org.